Okay. Greetings, compadres. Today, a quote by Rajneesh. Respect your uniqueness and drop comparison. Relax into your being. That sounds easy and hard at the same time to me. And, Rajneesh, if I knew how to do that fully, I'm just kidding. I think a lot of our uniqueness, at least for mine, is I don't know, it's figuring out how to navigate those negatives that we perceive as negative, or at least I do. The things that I first think are just like, oh, I can't believe people have to deal with this, that, or the other thing about me because it doesn't really fit into the status quo or the norm or what's acceptable. And, that is what is so powerful about an ADHD diagnosis, at least it was for me, is that I had a chance to finally have the world open up to me because I had surrendered and accepted that that's what I had. And it was empowering because then I got to learn about all these different ways that I learn. And I could look and see what the next step in the journey was going to be. And definitely it was unique and off the beaten path from some of the friends that I grew up with, for example, and a lot of the adults that I know today. So one thing is for sure, there won't be a boring or run-of-the-mill journey if you have an ADHD diagnosis or you just get one. It'll be different. And really, we have no choice but to just kind of drop the comparison because otherwise we can't really live that way. I found for me anyway. And so to relax into that, that's my challenge and also my joy to be able to do. And so it is with pleasure today that I move from the mystery meat sandwich into the chaplain's chat. And I can't tell you, I am so excited about this interview, you guys. The unexpected gift of podcasting is meeting fascinating people who I probably wouldn't otherwise bump into or cross paths with. And so, ADHD Awareness Month was last month, and I am going to go ahead and see where this conversation goes, because this is what I particularly love about having fellow ADHDers on the show is that it's kind of a mystery where we're going to go. Nobody really knows. We have a skeleton of a plan, but I'm thrilled to introduce to you Dr. Tish, and I can't wait for you to hear her story because I cheated, Dr. Tish. I listened to a podcast with you on it the other day just to kind of get a little bit more information about you, and I was blown away, like blown away. You're an amazing person. So Dr. Tish is an ADHD advocate and mentor. She has worked in healthcare for over 20 years. She was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age, and now as an adult, she shares her story and experiences in hopes of helping others and stopping the stigma. Love that. She has, wait for it, a Doctor of Health Science degree, Master of Public Health, and a Bachelor of Science degree. After growing up in special education, her passion is to raise awareness and support others diagnosed with ADHD. Welcome, Tish. And even just reading that, I'm telling you, and listening to your podcast that I was listening to the other day that you were on, one word comes to mind, and it's overcomer. That's what I think of automatically when I read this. I just, I'm amazed, and I'd love to just give you the floor and jump in and hear about your background, however much you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. And first, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I am thrilled to be here and share my story, really in hopes to help other people and really stop the stigma that a lot of us experience with having ADHD and other medical diagnoses. So my story starts back in second grade. Actually, let's go back to first grade. That's where my story really starts. I went to public school, and in first grade, I started to show signs of behavioral problems. I wasn't being able really to pay attention in class. I was daydreaming. I was up talking. I was, doing all the things that I wasn't supposed to do. And so I got passed on to the second grade. And in the second grade, my teacher, she was really starting to see signs of me not catching on to the materials that she was teaching. I just was not learning like the other students were learning. And I was constantly having, getting in trouble for getting up and talking and so forth. And so there was a pattern. And they decided to do an assessment on me and see if I have ADHD, and also to see if I would be a good fit for special education. And so very long story short, went through the assessment, got diagnosed with ADHD, and also it was determined I needed to be placed in special education. So I spent second grade all the way through my senior year in special education. I went to public school. I was still able to do, school activities, such as I was in band, I was a cheerleader, except I think I might have mentioned this in a previous podcast, but I was actually not able to cheer one year because my grades were so bad. But I was able to at least do those activities and just go to a separate building to take my classes. And so I get asked a lot, how did you do that? Were you made fun of? How did the other students, how were you treated? And so my story is a lot different than a lot of stories that I hear, because I did go to a pretty small school and I did not get made fun of. No one treated me any differently than anyone else. And so I'm very grateful for that and lucky that I was not treated differently than other kids. And so struggled on through school. Even in special education, I still struggled. And so my senior year, I saw all of my friends getting ready to go to college. They were taking, all the tests and things to get into college. And I thought, I want to go to college. I want to do this. I have never read an entire book, never took an algebra class or anything like that, didn't know my multiplication tables. That is the absolute truth. While special education was a great fit for me, I still felt like I was so far behind the other kids. And so my special education teacher and the counselor at the school, they helped me navigate through all the application process and all of the things you had to go through to get into school. I actually started off at a community college just to kind of test the waters. And it was not easy at all. It just was not easy. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I should just go on to university, because I did, I don't know, maybe a semester or two at community college. And I thought, let me just try the university and see how that works. And so before I even got into the university, I had accommodations made. I had, I went to therapy. I was on ADHD medication. I was given accommodations when I took tests, and if they were time tests, I had extra time to be able to take the test. I went to every type of algebra lab, math lab, reading lab I could get my hands on, went to tutoring. It took a lot of effort and a lot of time to get through school. It took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree. That's a long time, because I had to take elementary algebra. I can't even, maybe 3 or 4 times I had to retake it because I just could not get through it. Only got through it. And so it took me a long time to get through to get my bachelor's degree. But once I did, I graduated. I thought, you know what? I'm not going to stop now, because my whole life I've been told, you're not going to be able to go to college. You need to focus more. You're not going to amount to anything. You need to buckle down and try harder. All those things that oftentimes that a lot of people with ADHD hear. And so I use that instead of kind of wallowing in the sorrows of that. That actually is what fueled me to go to school. It fueled me to kind of prove to myself, and also not that I have to prove myself to other people, but to prove I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm not going to let my ADHD and some of the other learning disabilities that I have stop me from going to college. And so I applied to get into a master's program. I got in. It took me 2 years to get through. And I took a break from school for a little bit and then just decided I want to be a doctor. I want to get my doctorate in health science. I really want to just keep on moving forward with this. And there was a piece of me not only that doing this for myself and really to kind of show people, you can't stop me. I'm gonna do this. But it was almost like I was craving to learn. Again, special education was such a wonderful thing, and it was the best fit for me. But I felt like I didn't have the tools at that time to really learn and soak in what I was being taught. And so once I found the right, combination of things that worked for me, I was craving what I missed out on for all of those years. And so I crave school. I crave learning. It's almost like I just want more of it. And so that's just a really brief, story of how I went from special education to getting my doctorate. It was not easy. It was a very long process. I'm 45 years old, and I've been in school majority of my life. I didn't finish my doctorate until 2019, and so I've literally been in school my whole life. But I felt accomplished in a way, like I went from being in special education, which is a wonderful thing, to getting my doctorate. And so I just want to share my story and show people that whatever it is that you want to do, not everybody wants to go to college, and that's fine. Whatever it is in your soul that sparks you, if it's being a musician or an artist or an athlete or whatever it may be, follow that spark. Follow that motivation and let it just take you to places that you didn't realize that you could go. It's so important to listen to yourself, listen to your heart, and try to drown out a little bit of the things that we often hear, the negative things that we often hear with having ADHD. And so it's just, that's kind of also what helped motivate me along, is drowning out the noise, I guess you could say. So
this is fascinating. This is so amazing to me. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm just baffled by the way that you were able to not attach to negative messaging, and instead, because you used the word fuel, and I loved that. And I'm just curious, how did you do that? How did you turn those negative thoughts or negative comments that you may have heard? How did you turn that into fuel? Did you just have kind of a resolve to just go, I'm interested, I'm going to do it? Or did you ever get down about it?
That's a great question. And I ask myself that every single day. How did I do it? Because I look back, and that imposter syndrome is strong with me. I look back and I'm thinking to myself, how in the heck did I do this? How did I go from literally special education to this? How did I do it? And I don't know what kept me fueled. I don't know what motivated me, except for those little voices inside of me telling me to don't give up. Don't listen to what that people have to say. Use what you've heard and really douse that fuel on into you, and just keep that spark alive. And so it's not easy. And of course, I've been down before. I mean, there's been points in time where I'm like, it took me several times to get through elementary algebra. And so even at that point, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? I mean, can I really do this? I mean, is this even, can I even get through all of this, And I thought to myself, I'm not going to give up. I don't care if it takes me 10 times to take the same class over and over again. I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to keep going. And so I'm glad I didn't give up. I'm glad I didn't listen to people saying negative things to me, even some professors and teachers. Of course, I mean, I didn't have all great professors and teachers. And so I would even have some kind of under the breath, are you sure this is maybe the route for you to go? And even hearing that kept that fuel going inside of me. So it's kind of like, I'm going to prove you wrong. You're not going to tell me that I can't do something. And so, yeah, I don't have an answer for that, but I do ask myself that quite a bit.
Tish, this is amazing to me also because, you mentioned you're 45, I'm 44, and I think I might be 45. I don't know. I was born in 76. Can't even figure it out right now. But my point is, a lot of people my age who I know are kind of in this space where it's like, it's too late to start a new career, or it's too late to turn a different direction and go down another path. And like, you blow that out of the water. You completely were like, hey, it took me a long time and I just stuck with it. And I love that you said you were craving to learn. I think that's
Mhm.
just such a beautiful life idea anyway, is to be
Yeah.
craving to learn. And in that sense, you probably weren't in a rush, right? If you were enjoying it. And, I think back to my college days, and it's like, I was just kind of trying to get through to the next thing, get the degree, move on to whatever was next. And I didn't really, there's very little that I really retained, and I too, I think it's funny that you brought up the algebra because I picked a major at my university that literally you didn't have to take math for.
Oh,
So I know. So I picked communication, and that's why I picked it. So I mean, I just I'm impressed so much by your resolve to just not let it beat you.
right.
And I think the messaging, at least for me with ADHD, so many tasks seem daunting,
Mhm.
and it is so hard sometimes to get over that wall of terrible and, and even try because, you know, even computers intimidated me. Like when I came out of all of my, child rearing years and everything. And I was like, I want to write a book. And, they're like, okay, put it in a Google Drive. I was like, I don't even know what that is. Truly. I mean, I just,
Yeah.
I was like a deer in the headlights. And so I'm impressed with all of that you just took it step by step and took as much time as you needed. And I'm wondering, how did you give yourself permission to do that? Instead of, oh, well, I got to get out of here in 4 years, and then I got to go to grad school and I got to get out of that in 2 years. Or how did you give yourself agency over your time frame?
There were certain points, especially when I was going through my bachelor's degree, that I really, especially toward the end of the bachelor's degree, I was like, I want to get done with this, and I need to try to go ahead and try to rush through the rest of this. But I knew where I came from, and I knew if I wasn't patient with myself in school, that I was just going to cause more stress on myself. And so I knew going in, even at a young age, I knew going in, if I was not patient with myself and if I didn't give myself some grace to fail, that I would not make it through. So I knew going in, I was going to fail some classes, and I knew going in, I mean, I didn't want to focus on the negative side of things, but I was just being realistic in the sense of, you are going to struggle, you are going to fail, and you're going to have be patient with yourself. And I like how you said, back, we're the same age. And so, back when we were kids, there wasn't a lot of education and resources, at least where I grew up, about ADHD. And so I think at that time, the easiest thing for them to do is, we got to put her in special education. We don't know what else to do with her at that time. So I don't know if you experienced that part of it or not, but I look at that time frame of late 70s, early 80s time, and I, compare it to the resources and education and all the stuff that we have available now. And it's like day and night. And so,
Totally.
yeah. And so back to your question of how did I kind of walk through that? I just knew that I was just going to have to try to build my own toolbox, I guess you could say, as I learned and grew throughout the years. And that's what I did. There's not a fix all, and there's not a perfect fix for having ADHD. Everyone is different, and what works for me may not work for the next person, but learning all of those ways to help navigate and manage some of my ADHD traits and what medication is the right fit for me. That's another thing is, it's a trial and error about medication. And some people, it doesn't work at all. And so it's not a right fit for all people. So there's even that layer of it too. I think, some people may think, oh, I'll just take this medication and be okay. It does help, but you still have to do a lot of other things to help, move things along. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I definitely identified and resonated with your, on a smaller scale, your special ed experience. I was tested, I can't remember what grade this was. I think it was one of the upper grades of elementary school. So fourth, fifth, sixth. It was before sixth for sure. But I grew up in Silicon Valley. And so it was like everybody was super smart. Everybody's parents worked at, Hewlett Packard. And this was pre, Google and Facebook and all of that. But we had a lot of people who were just kind of at the very brink of the tech boom. And so really, really smart, just smart area with a real high emphasis on education. And so along comes me. And I remember like back in the second grade, cheating off of my neighbor's paper because I had no idea what was going on. And you know how math is, if you don't get the first concept, it builds on itself, right? So I remember I just felt so like, well, I got to figure out how to do the school thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy off of her paper. And then I continued finding those little loopholes, which is a funny foreshadowing for later in life when I kind of needed to do the same thing, find ways of doing things that didn't come naturally to me and weren't organically there. But by the time they tested me and gave me an assessment in the later grades, they were like, yeah, you're kind of far behind. And so they put me in I'll call it the remedial math class that met in a different area of the school. And, it kind of had a vibe about it. It kind of had you're kind of you're not really cutting it kind of vibe. You're in the B list class now for this. And what I did was I adapted to that, and I sort of took on that, oh yeah, I'm bad at math narrative. I took that on and almost personified it. And what I think is fascinating about, the mind body connection and all of that is yeah, I'll believe that messaging if, I'm just going to take it at face value. So what is so inspiring to me is that you did the opposite and you just kind of didn't roll over and sort of play dead, which is what I did at the time, essentially. And I didn't let it stop me, but I let it damage me. Does that make sense? I let the messaging seep into my person.
Right.
And really, to this day, those are my triggers. Feeling dumb, feeling stupid, feeling like somebody doesn't, think that I know what I'm talking about. It's a weird thing. And I think it's because of that childhood, those tendencies that I developed in childhood, and that, they sort of I watered those seeds over time. And so I find it really fascinating that you did the opposite. And it makes me encouraged that you turned your powerlessness, as some would call it, right, into power. And I was not diagnosed until I was age 39. I think I was just south of age 40. And, in a way, it was a big relief.
Right.
Because it put all the pieces together of the puzzle
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
What was
I
it
hear,
like for you when do you remember? Go ahead. Sorry.
when I got diagnosed, I was not given medication or anything at that time. They really didn't know a whole lot from from where I grew up about it. And so they really just put me in special education. So when I got older, I mean, I really didn't know any different. I just knew that, this is where I go to my classes, is what I'm supposed to do and so forth. But I will say, I did get reassessed because I was just curious, what if it's something else going on? What if it's, who knows? What if it's something else? And so I got reassessed in 2002, and then I got reassessed in 2012, and I just recently got reassessed just because nobody wants to have ADHD. No one wants to have ADHD. And I'm thinking maybe it'll just magically go away. And it doesn't. It does not go away. It does not go away. And so, I hear a lot of stories, and I get a lot of questions from people who are in their 30s and 40s and so on. And they ask, am I too old to get assessed? No, you are never, ever too old to get assessed at all. If you are seeing these traits and symptoms showing up with you, get an assessment done. Don't go through life struggling. And I'll often hear people who do get assessed and get diagnosed, they go through a grieving process. They really do. They go through these waves of, first they feel, oh, okay, this is relief. And now I know why I have felt this way my entire life. And then they kind of go into this, they get upset. Why didn't I figure this out sooner? Why did I have to struggle so much? What could I have been had I known this when I was in my elementary school or in my teens? They start to kind of question things. And so it's a grieving process, and everyone is different. And depending on the person, it takes time. And my message for that is, whatever you're feeling, happiness, relief, sadness, anger, those are all valid feelings. And you take the time that you need to go through those feelings, process those feelings, and really try to, work through it as best as you can. Because it's so important to know that a lot of people do go through very similar things when they do get a diagnosis, especially later on in life. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such an important brilliant point, is that, when we reach that diagnosis, whatever age that is, it makes us kind of pull out those reframing tools, right? Because it's like, okay, yeah, I could have been diagnosed earlier, but I wasn't.
Right.
And trying to just put it in terms of, well, I went through those journeys prior to being diagnosed for a reason. There's a reason that, I went through those. There are tools that I can, maybe it's even just so I can see what my life is now, that I'll have ways to help me cope, right? And be able to share my story later, so that somebody else can identify. It's like that, I talk about this a lot, but the Ram Dass quote, we're all just walking each other home. It's like, if I can come alongside somebody else and just go, yeah, I know what that's like. I mean, for me, that's huge. And I think too, the nice thing about a diagnosis is the fear is a little bit gone. It's sort of like, oh, there's a name for this, so I'm not crazy, is what you're saying.
Right.
And there's relief in that.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, I love what you talked about, building your own toolbox, because I think just, even in general, customization, it's so huge in life. And, not being one size fits all learners, one size fits all people. I'm wondering, since you were diagnosed so young, how did you, I guess what I'm trying to say is, swap out the tools that you needed to swap out along the way? How did you cope as you progressed in your learning and changed, or did you kind of keep the same tools? And what were a couple of those?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I have always kept the same tools in my toolbox from when I was younger to now. I just keep adding tools to the
Mhm.
toolbox as I'm continue to learn because honestly, I'm learning right along with everyone else. And with all the new research and things that are coming out, there's so many new things that are coming out to help. And so I think one of the things that helped me the most when I was younger is honestly going to tutoring and
Mhm.
having that extra one-on-one you know, help after school. Even though I was in special education, I still went to tutoring after school and had that one-on-one help with homework and helping me with my reading comprehension and all of the stuff that I was struggling with. And so I don't go to tutoring now because I'm not in school. However, I did go, like I said, to all like the math labs and the algebra labs and all of those things, and had some one-on-one help during my classes and things. I think I have swapped the tutoring out for therapy. Even though
Mhm.
I did go to therapy during college, I've continued to go to therapy because it does help really with my stress level, because if I'm stressed, my ADHD traits are going to be a lot worse. You know, and just things like that, just finding healthy ways to cope with different stressors or whatever it may be. And so therapy has been a huge help. It's not for everyone, but it has definitely helped me. And I think that's the thing about having ADHD too, is that everyone's experience is so different. It's
Mm.
not like a diabetes diagnosis where you get insulin and you kind of know what the care plan is going to be. There are three main types of ADHD, and depending on, you know, what type you get diagnosed with could look a little different on how you are going to, what your care plan may be.
Mm.
And so, and if you are diagnosed, let's say with ADHD combined, and you have a family member or friend that's also diagnosed with the same type of ADHD, just because you have the same type, it could still look very differently. And so the toolkit can look and be different for everyone. And so it's just trying to find the right tools that helps you be able to really navigate through life and be as successful as you possibly can. I will also say too, I think that with therapy and really just learning myself has just been a huge help. I honestly did not open up about my story until last year. And so this is all very new with me opening up about my story.
Mm.
I just wanted to share. There was this burning feeling inside of me of just put yourself out there, share your story because it's going to help someone else. And I think by doing that, that has helped me so much because I don't have to hide
Right.
anymore. I don't have to pretend, I guess, anymore. I don't have to have this layer, kind of this little gray cloud over me. I'm struggling inside, but I have to hide it. It's masking. And so that's been a huge help, really opening up and sharing my journey. And I'm learning, like I said, along the way too. So
Mhm.
it's been a lot of help, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I love that so much. And in a way, any places of pain are really, when you're able to share them and then somebody can identify and get help from that, there's
Right.
nothing better, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
know that through my sobriety journey. Um, that's just the best ever, is
Yeah.
making something from this pile of ashes into, something beautiful, and to be able to come alongside somebody and walk that journey with them, it's huge, and it's something unique to the diagnosis, right?
Mhm.
And so it's hard to relate if you're not a part of that, if you haven't gone through it. And it's a very unique and very special ability to be able to take those private kind of struggles that we've had
Mhm.
and then be able to share them with somebody else and encourage
Right.
them. Yeah. So love
Absolutely.
that. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. And I love, a few times you mentioned asking for help. And it
Yes.
dawned on me while you were talking that that is something I did not feel comfortable doing. And I know now like, it's pretty obvious to me why that was. And it's because I had this pride thing. I just did not want anybody to think that I didn't know what was going on or I didn't understand a concept. I did not want to reveal that because I thought that they would think that I was dumb. And I really did not have, and in fact, I didn't have this until far later in my life. Actually, probably in 2011, when I first started getting sober, is when I first started really realizing I didn't have a love for myself. I didn't have, that sense inside that I was worth it. I just hadn't fostered that yet. It wasn't that I had a bad childhood. It was just that I hadn't really engaged in that concept or that idea yet. And that was huge. So I think a couple things, it's like, gosh, if I'm worth it, I can get assessed with something I'm struggling with. Anything in the mental health field, right? If I put myself on the map, right, and I take that time to go seek out what is going on, I'm worth figuring out, I'm not happy. I got to figure out why, right? And making that our quest. Due to the fact that, that's a way of showing self-love, is to go investigate that further. And I'm very moved by your story. And I'm wondering, kind of, as we start to wrap this up, which I don't want to do, but what do you do today? What's your job, and how do you, what does your daily life look like?
Yeah. And so, I work at I live in New England. And so I work at a medical research institute as a learning and development consultant. And so I do a lot of, I teach a lot of different courses and classes on emotional intelligence and communication skills and things like that. And those are some things that I've had to learn along the way to help cope with having ADHD. And so it's not easy for me, to work full time, but I do. I just try to put one foot in front of the other because I do love my job and I love what I do so much. But having ADHD, you wake up some days and you ask yourself, how am I going to do this today? I mean, I can't even get out of the bed. How am I going to do this today? And so I think just trying to keep that fire going, and some days it's dimmer than others, but at least if I have just tiny little ambers still there, if I can just kind of spark those a little bit and just say, you know what, you're not going to let this defeat you. You are going to get up. You're going to, put one foot in front of the other, and you're going to do the best that you can. If you fail today, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You have tomorrow, you can get up and try it again. And if you don't succeed tomorrow, you have the next day that you can get up and try it again. And so not every day is going to be a success. You're going to run into things that you consider a failure that you've done. It could be, impulse bought something, or you messed something up at work, or whatever it may be. And I think that having some grace and patience with yourself, because our brains, they do operate differently. And we have to remember that. And we have to remember that because of our brains and our unique, the way that we learn and process things, that we have to just have some grace for ourselves and just try to do the best that we can. And so that's what I do. I've made a lot of mistakes throughout my life because of having ADHD with impulsivity and things like that. And so I think, now that I'm 45, I don't beat myself up over the, things I've done in my past, or if I slip up and do like an impulse buy, or if I mess something up because I wasn't paying attention. I had to remind myself just I have a neurodivergent brain, and this is not an excuse. I'm not making excuses. This is not a label, but this is the facts. This is a diagnosis that I have, and this is just who I am. And so I just try to remind myself of those things. But yeah, it's tough though.
It
Yeah,
is, it's tough.
it's
And I love
tough.
that because correct me if I'm wrong, but I also hear you talking about when you use the word grace, that always makes me think of having compassion. Just having
Yeah,
compassion for myself that yeah, my brain operates differently. And that's okay. Like there's
right.
nothing inherently wrong with that. But it does sometimes, give me that reminder that I need to learn to try and think outside the box and, continue to learn and grow and seek and foster new coping skills. And yeah, I relate so much. I was thinking about my one challenge and I'll kind of wrap it up with this is do you have any tips for calendaring? That is my like, if I were to pick one thing, and I know, I mean, I've got 8 kids, right? So it is, my calendar is just nuts. But what I've learned to do for now, and it helps a little, is I get my husband to sit with me and do calendaring with me.
Yes.
But boy, I'll tell you, I'm grumpy when I'm calendaring. I am like not fun to be around. I hate it. I still miss things. I set reminders on my phone. But do you have anything that's worked for you or tips that have worked for others that you know
So the
with
one thing, yeah, so the one thing that I found that is helpful, it's not a fix-all, but it has definitely helped, is to put everything on one online calendar, because I was working off of 2 or 3 different calendars, and of course I was forgetting things. And so if I can have one online calendar that has, kid activities or, doctor's appointments and work events and things like that, where I can set reminders and alerts, that has helped me so much. And also, I know a lot of doctors' offices, even car maintenance places, they have an option to get, text reminders and things like that. And sometimes it if you click the link, it'll take you to your calendar and put it on your calendar for you. And so I always ask, a doctor's office or wherever I may go that I have an appointment coming up, do you have an option to send me a text or a calendar reminder? And I try to use those as much as possible. Not everyone has those, of course, but I definitely ask if they do, because it does help try to keep me on track with different things. But I think the
yeah,
one calendar has helped some, definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
because, you know, uh, forgetting about appointments and just not showing up to things, I've been there. I still do it sometimes, even with using the one calendar. So,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I'm going to try that because, we get screwed up sometimes in my big family. I think I'm being all like organized and fancy, and I'll have like, a Google Calendar, everybody's color coded, blah, 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 which there's a time and a place for in some situations where that works beautifully. But I've learned on my calendar, it doesn't work so well because inevitably somebody will come along, uncheck one of those boxes, then all the stuff for school suddenly isn't showing up. I mean, there are like complications, right? So I
yeah,
love the idea of trying the one calendar. So thank you for that.
yeah, of
I'm going to give it a
course.
whirl. I'm going to give it a whirl for sure.
Yes, yes, of course.
Dr. Tish, thank you so much. I can't even tell you how wonderful this has been to have you on. And I'm wondering, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram, and my handle is truly_Tish_ ADHD. So you can find me there. And then I have a link in my bio that I will take you to my blog, and I also have a podcast. So, and you can find me on both of those things too. So I have really enjoyed this conversation. I'm honored that you invited me on to be a guest. So thank you so much, Amy, for having me on. This was a great conversation. I could honestly sit here and talk to you all day long about all of the things of ADHD. So I really do appreciate you having me on as a guest. So thank you.
Oh, of course. I'm like thrilled to have you. So thank you so, so much. And my spirit is full. I just have a cup full of joy right now. And I look forward to having you back sometime. You really have a great gift of communication. and telling your story in a way that just is so relatable and beautiful. So Tish, thank you so much. I wish you all the best. And to everybody out there listening, love and light to you. Be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.